right, thank you. We are a pilot study assessing the effect of intergenerational workshops on successful aging. I'm Maddie Barber.
I'm Patty Orozco.
I'm Shannen.
I'm Tanera, Hammond.
I'm Washko.
All right. So in 2014, there were 46 million people aged 65 and older living in the United States, which accounted for 15% of the total population. The older population in 2030 is expected to be twice as large as it was in 2000, accounting for more than 21% of the U.S. population. When looking at this older adult population, there's often a stereotype of an increase in depression, social isolation, and loneliness. So combining the knowledge of an increase in older adult population and an increase in these negative depression, social isolation, and loneliness, it is clear that there needs to be goals to increase successful aging. Many of the treatments and interventions that already exist are in the realm of positive psychology, which include meditation, mindfulness, and reminiscence therapy. So Wofford was awarded a grant through the CIC and AARP Foundation grant to implement an intergenerational workshop specifically targeting low-income older adults in the Spartanburg community. The goal of this intervention was to reduce social isolation and increase successful aging. The grant allowed for 10 student fellows, 10 Wofford students, who each completed one workshop per week at 10 locations for a total of about 100 workshops throughout the course of the semester. Wofford students were encouraged to attend these workshops, and many courses from the humanities and philosophy departments were required to come as a part of their course credit. The workshops took place at 10 locations within the Spartanburg community, ranging from community centers where a free meal is provided, continuing care facilities where Medicaid is accepted, and low-income housing through the Spartanburg Housing Authority or government-provided housing specifically for low-income older adults. Here you can see student fellow Omar Elmore at his location at the Archibald Rutledge apartment complex, which is low-income housing through the Spartanburg Housing Authority. To give you guys a better idea of what kind of topics were discussed during these workshops, some example prompts included discussing favorite childhood memories, asking opinions about general life satisfaction, and asking older adults some more general things about how music has impacted their life or how they feel about a specific topic. So looking more at our specific purpose, some of our main questions was how do we assess this program? So we, as a thesis group, developed measures to assess the program and then later assessed our own measures for accuracy. Another one of our big questions was what type of positive impact does our program have on older adults, specifically looking at the reduction in social isolation and improved emotional well-being and seeing what the possible positive cognitive benefits were of our program.
So given the observational nature of our study, we were tasked with creating measures that properly assess the older adults throughout the workshop period. Each of the following measures were discussed in the following slides. We created a post-workshop survey designed specifically for the student fellows to complete, an observational checklist in which our thesis group completed, and we assessed artifacts in which the older adults produced during these workshops. And we also created interviews with older adult participants as well as the student fellows that were conducted only at the end of the semester. One of the measures we created was a post-workshop survey in which the student fellows were instructed to fill out after workshop completion. The student fellows' input data had allowed us to keep track and organize information that we thought was important. For example, we kept track of number of repeat older adults for each workshop, as we felt it was an important indication of workshop enjoyment. This was our attempt at quantifying very qualitative data. Another measure we created was an observational checklist. Because we were unable to conduct pre-post tests with the older adults on workshop enjoyment due to ethical reasons, we felt like these behaviors included in this checklist were indicative of workshop enjoyment through engagement levels. We did not attend every single workshop, however we attempted to attend workshops toward the beginning and the end of the semester in order to evaluate change in behaviors over time. Again, because we were unable to give these pre-post tests on the older adults, we felt like these behaviors included in this checklist were indicative of workshop enjoyment. We also looked at artifacts made by the older adults during the workshop. The workshop discussion varied, as some workshops were more writing intensive and others were more conversation or discussion based. Here are some examples of the artifacts produced during the workshop time. The example on the left required older adults to draw a picture of the house they grew up in and discuss their favorite memory associated with it. The example on the right asked older adults to write their favorite place to visit. Writings and other tangible works were collected and analyzed after the workshops. Because this is purely observational data, we analyze the products by change over time in returning individuals in the hope that we would see an improvement or an increase in writing participation in the older adults.
At the very beginning of the semester, we looked at various pre-existent measures for different aspects such as social isolation, loneliness, and depression, but we ultimately decided that these measures weren't sufficient for our study and were too invasive, and so we as a DC group created our own measures. We interviewed the older adults at the end of the workshops, at the end of the semester, in order to assess from their perspective on how the workshops went and to get information about the older adults themselves. And we looked at social engagement, life satisfaction, and workshop satisfaction. As far as the student fellows, at the beginning of the semester, they are tasked with keeping detailed journals of every workshop they completed, along with specifics about how the older adults responded, what kind of things they were sharing, and how their relationships were developing. And so at the end of the semester, we also interviewed the student fellows in order to see how the interactions had developed over the course of the semester, and from their perspective, what they thought the older adults were gaining through the workshops.
So this is a table of the post-workshop survey. You can see the information that was recorded up at the top. The workshops range from 3 to 7. However, the workshops have continued throughout the semester, so the numbers are actually a little bit higher than what is reported here. The number of older adults were averaged out, and it ranged from 3.5 to 15, and the total number of older adults served was 182. The total number of older adults per workshop, the average number of repeats range from 2.3 to 13, and it's important to keep in mind the number of total adults when looking at the average number of older adult repeats, and we looked at this because it was one of the biggest indicators of enjoyment. And the average number of younger adults was calculated to see if there was a 1-to-1 ratio, and it's clear that there wasn't, but this is important because of the intergenerational aspect of the workshops. The type of writing and activity was recorded, and the good majority of it was autobiographical writing and conversation. This could be due to, or other activities included poetry, art making, and fiction writing. However, the fact that some of the workshops had 100% while others had 43% or 50% could be due to the different physical and cognitive abilities of the older adults. And the average enjoyment rating was based on the fellows' opinion on how the workshops went, based on how engaged the older adults were and how they thought that the older adults enjoyed it, and a lot of those ratings are very high as well. So in terms of the observational checklist, you can see that at the start of the semester, here we go. There's a difference in body language from the beginning than at the end. The positive changes toward the end included loving body language, increased engagement, and more consistent conversation, and that is very indicative of enjoyment and the formation of close relationships.
The older adults reported spending a lot of time at their various locations, and that they enjoyed participating in the activities provided by their locations, such as bingo or having music play for them. However, they also, because they reported spending so much time at these locations, they reported that they wish they spent more time with their family, because a lot of them no longer live at home. And although it was a large question, we asked them how satisfied they felt with their lives. And overall, they reported feeling absolutely satisfied with their lives. A lot of them reported reminiscing often and positively on their past. And although they are all of low income, and some of them had lived in lower income housing their entire lives, they felt overall satisfied with where their lives had led them, despite opportunities they wish they could have had. And as far as workshop satisfaction, they also reported being satisfied with the workshops and enjoying them, especially being able to interact with the younger adults, because they, quote, get frustrated with all the older adults sometimes. They also reported that they really enjoyed being able to share their experiences and their knowledge with the younger generation, because it's an opportunity they don't usually have. And they also felt that the workshop helped them make friends within their community and get more involved.
So in terms of the student fellow interviews, it showed that the interactions were uncomfortable and awkward at the beginning, but then they started to engage more toward the end. And some challenges included cognitive ability, hearing, and mobility. But there were a lot of gains from the workshops, which included the formation of strong bonds and relationships, as seen by a story that I was told by a fellow. She stated that 2 older adults lost a family member during one of the workshops, and so they sat together and talked and cried together for about 30 minutes, which just shows that a really strong connection formed between them. And in terms of artifacts, you can see the first writing over here was not very detailed as compared to the second writing on the right, or on the left. The artifacts became more personal and detailed as the older adults became more comfortable around the fellows and the other students, and they began to share more of their personal stories.
So, as Shannen and Tanera have mentioned, the older adults established a relationship with the student fellows, and we were able to see this with our observational checklist and the interviews that we implemented. So because we were able to see this, then we assumed that the measures that we used were successful. Also, it is important to note that the study is only 35% complete, and we will be continuing in the spring and hopefully in years to come. Also, some of the limitations that we have encountered so far are that the older adults are self-reporting, and therefore there could be information that they are withholding from us. Also, the cooperation of the directors at each of these locations is essential for the workshops to be effective. We did run into some problems with some of the directors at one of the locations, and it did affect the way in which the workshops were conducted. Future directions would establish a control group, which we did not have in this current study, and we would also find ways to better observe each of the workshops. Thank you for listening. At this time, we will be taking any questions.
Questions? How did you choose the topics you assessed them on? Like, for example, you asked the older adults how music affected their lives.
We didn't choose those topics. The student fellows were in charge of each workshop, so they are the ones who chose what topic of each workshop. We were just assessing.
I am one of the fellows in the program, and we kind of catered to the participants that were at each location. So we saw that some had less cognitive abilities than other workshops, and we would cater to what they needed, and sometimes we'd ask for recommendations, and we'd do what they wanted to see. So that helped.
Did the fellows have to get the workshops approved before it did it? Or?
No.
Okay.
It was very much what they felt they should do. So like at some workshops, as you saw on the artifact side, they had like art, and then in other workshops they had to do more writing. And it was very dependent on their cognitive ability and what they wanted to do.
It seems that overall, definitely all had a positive outcome of emotional and enjoyment, but did y'all have any participants who didn't like it due to reminiscing on family members they didn't have anymore, or like she said, they were reminiscing on their home life, which they no longer live in, and that kind of stuff?
Do you want to say something?
Well, I know one of the participants, one of the topics was, where would you like to travel to? And she said, I don't even want to think about traveling because I'm too old about being thinking of going somewhere where I'm incapable of traveling and walking around and things like that. So she felt that she was restricted, so she just didn't feel like participating. But other participants felt like, oh, I want to think about the things that I could do and things like that. But it's all individual variation.
It's also important to note that these workshops were completely voluntary. So even if the workshop was occurring in the location where these older adults lived, it was their choice to attend or not. So that's why we looked so closely at repeat older adults, because the ones who did not return, we were assuming are the ones who did not enjoy it in the first place.
So since you only looked at adults who chose themselves to go to the locations, would you say that was still representative of the population?
Yeah, so I actually forgot to mention, the older adults that were attending are probably less socially isolated and depressed, and we were aiming to look at older adults that are socially isolated and depressed. So future studies would look at how we could reach those people who do need more help and so that the workshops could help them successfully age.
Anybody else? All right, thank you.